The cartels using drones is a very, very real thing. You can buy it on Amazon. They have a little like hook, and it'll drop, so you can release things. So you just put a block of cocaine or whatever and fly over and drop it, and then you're gone, right? Yeah, you can just turn the whole drone into a bomb. That's another thing that's going on in the Ukraine-Russia war is just putting a bunch of shit on these things and making them pop when they hit. Second that drone leaves the ground, it belongs to public airspace. So like you can fly a drone over somebody's house and they can't do anything about it, right?
What exactly happened? Did you bump the drone into something or?
No, it flew into me. It yeah, I got confused because it was relying solely on like GPS and it didn't have it in my basement, and so it was like wah, it ran into my arm and I was like, oh, I'll never do that again.
Welcome again to the Hackers Empire podcast. I'm your host, Nilesh, and our guest in today's episode is Tony Fontana. Now, Tony is an interesting chap. He was a firefighter before, but then he switched into security and then eventually into drone security. And in this episode, he gave some really insightful, really useful information on the anatomy of a drone, his approach when he's hacking into a drone, and different applications of drones, the military applications, the end user applications. And something really interesting happened when we were talking about how you can actually hack into drones. But you can also use drones to hack. Now, we are planning on another episode in which we are going to talk about how you can use drones to actually hack, mostly on the physical penetration side of the things. But this episode has really valuable information that is going to change how you think about drone security. Now, one of the reasons I am bringing guests from different domains is that we need to realize that security is more than AppSec and bug bounties. And that's why I wanted to have an episode with Tony Fontana. And you are in for a treat for this episode. Let's hear it from Tony himself, how you can hack into drones. Enjoy. Oh, you're still there.
All right.
Cool. So what's up, bro? What's been happening in the Discord community?
Man, I haven't been around too much, honestly. It's been one of those things where the past like 2 weeks I've been so busy that I haven't even had time to like do anything for fun. It's all been work. So, I check in occasionally on Discord and make sure everybody's behaving, but my admins do a good job, so I don't have to work too hard.
Yeah, you have a real good community thing going on. So I'm gonna also bring Philip Wiley eventually. I'm gonna reach out to him.
Oh yeah,
So yeah,
awesome.
cool, man. So let's talk drone hacking.
Yeah, that's I'm excited, man.
Yep, and you are the right man to talk about drone hacking. So
Yeah, one of the few.
why is that though? Why do you think that is? I mean, people are too much focused on AppSec, or what's happening?
I mean, from what I can like just a pulse from the community, it looks like everybody's really focusing more on cloud-based security. And yeah, AppSec, you have a lot of people that just they focus on what they can do remotely over the cloud. And hardware's always been like kind of a niche thing that not a lot of people want to get into because it's intimidating. And fortunately, drones are like a combination of a little bit of cloud, hardware, RF hacking, network hacking, Wi-Fi hacking, regular just Linux. It's everything. Mobile app. So you have a huge amount of things that go into one small like IoT package essentially that flies around, and that's essentially what a drone is flying IoT device. But
So the reason they are not doing it is because first it is complex, and second they want to do something that is more remote, right?
yeah, I think that's what I've gathered. That and a lot of people can't just like go out, buy a drone and then hack it, brick it, whatever I've bricked a lot of drones. they're personal ones. I don't typically brick client ones. They don't
That must have
they don't
cost
like
some money.
that.
The drones are expensive, especially in the States. So
They are.
it must have cost you some money, bro. But
They're so yeah, I mean it essentially when I first started I was buying just drones. Eventually though what I got to the point of doing was just buying the autopilot. Like PX4 is a really, really common drone autopilot, and you can get a full setup on Amazon for about $100, 100 US dollars. And that's a great place to start because that'll give you everything that you need to have in order to like work your way through the steps of drone hacking.
got it. So before we talk about actually, hacking into drones, I think a good place to start is with the sort of the anatomy of a drone. Just boilerplate, a basic drone, what kind of components it has. So that would help me understand and the listeners understand what you are getting yourself into. So if you can talk about
Yeah,
that,
sure.
yeah.
No, that's a great start. So usually with a drone, you're going to have a GCS or a ground control station. So that's where your pilot's going to sit, and then you're going to have the drone itself, the airframe. Um, Within that airframe, you'll have an autopilot. You'll have electronic speed controllers. Sometimes you'll have companion computers, um, payload, which in this case, a payload's like a camera, not like shellcode. Um, and then you'll have power boards. You'll have, it really is the thing that I love about drones is that it's not necessarily like you got to have certain components, like you have to have the autopilot, and the speed controllers are what keep the motors from frying themselves out. And then other than that, though, like your GPS setup can be completely different than any other one that's out there. So that's one of the really cool things about it.
Okay, so you have these different components. So all these components, do they have a different attack surface? I mean, when you are approaching a target, what exactly do you look into first?
So my typical approach, it's not much different than traditional like recon, enumeration, and then working your way through it that way. I'll typically start with like a very in-depth OSINT where I try to figure out as much as I can. A lot of times, default passwords will be on the website, inside of a user manual or something like that. So finding those default creds is huge, and then working my way through like, okay, I'll look at the drone and I'll look at the GCS and I'll start on the GCS. I'll start, seeing what I can do with that. When I have that in my hands, can I upload to it? What kind of ports do they even have available that I can plug into? And then once I've gotten my way into the GCS, then I'll work my way through and look at RF, which is that's a different animal entirely. But you look at what's in between the drone and the GCS. Like, is it encrypted? Is it easy to find? Do they frequency hop? Um, you know, all those different factors that go into drone communication. A lot of times they'll use, different. The frequencies are always different, but they're usually in the same band, right? Like 915, 915 megahertz, 2.4 gigahertz, the 5 gigahertz range. I think there's some out there that are starting to use 6 gigahertz, which my hack RF doesn't even go. I don't think I can even get past 6. So, um, but yeah, and then you just do the same thing with the drone. Like you take a look at it and you look and say, okay, what can I do with just this? Like looking at it, are there ports? Like, can I plug a USB into it? Can I, you know, access anything that has pins like to the whatever board they have in there? And then after you've done all of that, usually at that point, like I can get some form of a shell, be it on the GCS or on the drone. Um, I'd prefer it on the GCS though, because most of these drones use real-time operating systems, which in the embedded world is they're very, very lightweight operating system. And all of the binaries that are on there have to be they have to be compiled with the firmware or with the OS. So like you cannot add stuff to a lot of these. And, you can't just like drop shell code on there, run it, and say, okay, cool, I got a shell. You're like, I have to work. You have to live off the land in a sense with these. And so like Chibi OS is an example of one. It's like it's a different animal. Like you have to get lucky in some cases, and because they need it to be so stripped down. But yeah, if I can get a shell on the GCS, then I can use it's like computer. You have full access to it, then you can pretty much do anything that they could do.
Okay, so when you were talking about default passwords, uh, what exactly, if let's say you do a drone does has the default password, what does that give you access to?
So usually that'll be like the default access to get into the GCS. When we test drones, what we're doing essentially is testing it as if like somebody left the GCS somewhere, or somebody like, can you access it remotely? What capabilities exist? And it's a very new space too, so um, we're kind of like, as we progress through and find different things, that's where a lot of this is coming from too. Is like, um, I was a firefighter for a while before, and what I noticed is that like on any kind of scene where you would have like a drone, you have people everywhere, and you have somebody come up and just take it and walk off. And what they could be doing is taking it to reverse it and figure out how they can knock it out of the sky. If you have some guy like with a meth lab who doesn't want drones over his house, right, or something bad, nefarious, you don't want them to be able to knock these public safety drones out of the sky. So that's one thing that I test for: is how secure is it? Can you walk by, plug in a rubber ducky, and then take off? And if you do that, is that going to make it? Is that going to give them full access? Like it's more of that aspect, as well as traditional. Like, if you hook it up to Wi-Fi, can I get in through a bad, like an old service that has a known exploit?
So they have started using drones for surveillance in the states. I'm not sure about India, but since you talked about, if a drone is flying over a house and they're cooking fucking meth in the house, so bro, these people who buy sell drugs, do they have the technical team to actually shoot down? I mean, not essentially shoot down a drone, but to sort of hack into it. Have you heard of it, or you're just giving an example?
I've definitely heard of like the cartels using drones is a very, very real thing. They even use them to deliver fucking drones or drugs, dude. Like, put the little thing. You can buy it on Amazon. They have a little like hook, and it'll drop, so you can release things. So you just put a block of cocaine or whatever and fly over and drop it, and then you're gone, right?
It's
Um,
like a airdrop,
and
air supply.
yeah, yeah, like a supply drop
You're,
of cocaine.
you're sitting on your roof and suddenly drugs are falling off from the sky.
Yeah,
It's one application. I mean, drones are being used as you can deliver pizza, you can deliver drugs, and you can also
yeah,
drop fucking bombs.
yeah. I mean, you can just turn the whole drone into a bomb. That's another thing that's going on in the Ukraine-Russia war, is just putting a bunch of shit on these things and making them pop when they hit. And there's a lot of wartime. I would consider wartime drones far different than like your standard, like just like a regular application of a drone, because you're not going to have access to like whatever explosive they put on those and stuff. So it's not like it's a huge concern, but drones are everywhere now, and that's one thing that I've noticed, that um, people are starting to just have them recreation. People have them recreationally, and they like to fly them around. And um, I have my FA wow my FAA pilot's license for drones, and it's interesting because like the second that that drone leaves the ground, it belongs to public airspace. So like, you can fly a drone over somebody's house and they can't do anything about it, right? Um, but you also can't like look in somebody's window.
Mm.
You can't like you can't do anything that would be considered like an invasion of privacy with them. That's when you like, and I could see like the concern for that, but usually like yeah, there's drones flying over my house all the time, like kids playing with them,
Mm.
whatever. So everybody's got them, and that's kind of like where I think the need for drone security comes in. Um, because could you go out and jam those things? Yeah, you could easily jam them, but is it practical to jam them? Not necessarily. There's other ways to do it. But what I'm saying is like, yeah, like back to your original question that I rabbit trailed off of, like these cartels, they do want to know what kind of drones that like our drug enforcement agency is using, because they can then say, okay, like let's set this thing up that will deny that drone any kind of access to this airspace, and so then they lose that surveillance that they could use put on like whatever target they're going to hit. um, and so there's a lot of implication to certain things, and especially with the like different agencies using just off the shelf drones, there comes that big that danger. It's almost like, okay, I'm using an open source project, but at the same time, like how secure is that open source
Mm.
project? Like, are you checking every single pull request? Are you looking at every commit to make sure that somebody didn't slip a backdoor into it, right?
Got it.
It's the same principle. And so the space is changing a lot though, which is good to see.
So where you come in is actually you test drones for all these companies that. So what exactly you do? You test drones for companies that are being bought off shelf, or they are essentially building their own drones. I mean, how does that work?
Yeah, so I do a lot of tests on custom drones, like drones that people build for specific use case. Like I've seen some drones that are for agriculture, which is awesome. That's They can actually look at a field and be able to tell like what fungus is growing just based on like using an infrared camera and some lidar. They can paint this picture and say, oh, you just have to use this pesticide, like this specific fungicide, and save a whole bunch of crop. And so that's a cool application that I've seen come through. And it's things like that where, you know, they can't, cybersecurity always seems to come second.
Mm.
And on drones, it's still very new. Um, like if you go through and look at all these different applications on these proprietary drones, none of them are secure. Like, and if they are, it's usually something to do with, um, like you can almost always get in on just a config issue, right? And that's like a huge deal that I see with these smaller companies. Like bigger ones like DJI, that they have their stuff so locked down that like you have to have some heavy hitting tools to be able to get into them. Um, and they use their own protocol, communication protocol, which it's entirely different than what most other drones use. So when you are working on drones, you're gonna get like somebody will think of a use case, like whatever you want, really, and then like go out and build it, and then they send it to you, and they're like, "What do we do? Like, is it safe or secure?" And it's like, no,
We
but
don't know.
like, yeah, exactly. You have to look at the practicality of like the security as
Mm.
well. Like, is it practical to like do all this stuff from an attack standpoint? And that kind of ties back into like scoping it or figuring out like the actual level of like the CVE or whatever level. It's like, yeah, I did this, but like, is it practical? Nobody cares. Like, nobody's gonna actually do this. Um, and so that's kind of where all these companies are looking at, is like, how long does it take to hack it, and is it something people are gonna do? Um,
Okay.
they're mostly concerned about their firmware
Mm.
too, like dumping it. They don't like that. So
Yeah. You talked about multiple applications, military drones, yeah, even drug cartels using drones. Then agriculture is another example. But so now I have a question. Since because of these different use cases, what does gaining access to a drone actually means? Because it will depend on the use case itself, right? Uh, so when you're approaching a drone, will the your motive, will it depend on the use case? I'm just trying to understand how you approach.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a fantastic question. So your motive, like as an attacker, is there's the I just want to do it because I can do it. Then there's the I want to reverse the firmware and steal it, kind of that use case. Then there's the I want to figure out how it works so I can knock it out of the sky. You'll see that a lot on kind of the more military side, like first responder side of things. And then you have this like people don't like the thought of like people are freaked out by Chat GPT,
Mm.
right? They're, oh my god, it's the end of the world, Terminator, whatever. The Skynet's coming to get you. Um, and then they start thinking about a drone, which is an autonomous system. It uses a lot of AI to, handle all the different data that it gets. And so people have this fear of like, oh my god, these things are fucking flying around. They're taking pictures of me, and that people are losing. They think they're losing control of them. So a lot of it too is like giving a peace of mind um, to the consumer or just to the general public to say like this is a safe drone. It's not like you can't like somebody can't hack your drone and then look at your house and do creepy stuff. And then for like the police or fire or another first responder, it's like somebody can't like take over the drone and fly it away from us, or they can't like take over the camera, or
Mm.
they can't ruin an operation. And then military, it's like we don't want data giving away where the pilot is, especially like you look at Ukraine and the Ukraine Russia war. You have these, they're essentially all using off the shelf drones, right? Like they're just getting whatever they can. Well, you shoot one of those drones down, and if you can quickly get in and pull the log data, you can figure out where it took off, and then you can attack that spot, right? So that's another big concern is like encryption of all the data and what can you just grab, and then can you take it over and hurt somebody with it? Like can you have it fly back to the operator and like just run into that spot,
Yeah.
right? Like I got one of my drones that I built, um, I simulated and got it to go and fly and then just fly full speed back into the takeoff point. So it's things like that, like whatever you think that like you kind of have to like get creative too with what you every drone's going to be different with how you attack it because of that use case. And it's like, well, yeah, a farmer's not going to care that their drone is like, they don't care if you get into it, but then all of a sudden they care if you get into it and then you fly it over like a community of people and dump all that pesticide
Mm.
because they have like huge sprayers, right? And so like they're like I forget what the planes were that would go and drop the pesticide, but like if you took that over and flew it over somebody and then just dumped all that pesticide on a like group of people, that's like a bad op, that's a scary thing for people. So essentially with these use cases, you're looking at like, for one, you got to get creative. Like what would I want to do with this drone?
Mm.
Like that's really what I ask myself. Like I ask the customer, what do you want to do? Like what's the purpose of this? And then I think like, okay, well, what would I do if I wanted to prevent them from doing whatever they want, you know, or if I wanted to get information? Um, and then it comes to scoping too. You got to ask them what's important to you. Like, what do you not want somebody to have access to? Video feed, telemetry, like the RC controls. That's something that like they have to be secure on every drone, but you know, um, different things like different GPSs, stuff like that. It's really just everything is so different. Every drone is different,
No, so
and
mm,
that's
so gaining access can be pretty subjective based on the kind of drone, kind of based on the use case and what the attacker wants to do. I mean, you can spray pesticides on a bunch of people, and you can also, essentially win a war if you think about it. If let's say Ukraine or Russia, they're able to reverse engineer drones. Let's say Russia reverse engineers drones of Ukraine, they can actually hit those Ukraine bases.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a huge that's actually a huge thing over there right now, is that like a lot of you have a lot of data being passed off that is quick, pull the SD card and then you've got the logs. So if you can shoot it down, you pull the SD card, you plug it in, and then you just flip it. You get a suicide drone and send it over there.
Hmm.
And you can almost like instantaneously, if you build a program for it, you could set it up to go, okay, I'm going to click this in, I want it to return home, right? And then it'll just return to its start point and blow up. So there's a lot of like, yeah, there's a lot of super like funny, it like goes funny cases all the way up to like, people could die from it kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the harder parts about drone hacking, is finding the dangers of that use case that are realistic.
Got it, man. Okay. So we talked about the approach, and we talked about your methodology, and we talked about what would gaining access to a drone means. Now, if you actually want to break it down into, let's say, a methodology, so in, let's say, a traditional pen test, we have a methodology. You're going to recon the target, then you're going to, try to get initial access, and then you're going to, get persistent access, stuff like that. So, is how different hacking into a drone, or your methodology is different from a traditional pen test for someone who's coming from a more of a traditional pen test side of the things, who wants to get into drone hacking?
Yeah, sure. That's so it's a lot of traditional stuff. That's what's nice about it, is like some of the GCSs, they run like Ubuntu, or they'll just run a standard form of Linux. So getting access to that is no different than getting access to a Linux machine on a network, right? And then I'll start with the GCS, and my methodology is to recon the GCS, exploit it, and then like you said, I'll do a privilege escalation, and then I'll, yeah, persistent access if it's feasible. Then yeah, I'll definitely do persistence, mostly because I just hate reconnecting to them. But do persistent access, and then seeing if you can pivot from that to like, okay, now I can get into the GCS software itself. Okay, now I can read the encryption for the radios, and then now I can sniff the traffic between them, and I can parse that data and actually see what the drone is doing. And then you can even go as far as to use, there's a lot of FTP upload, and you could upload, things from, if you can figure out what the operating system is on the hardware itself on the drone, you could even upload something through the FTP and execute it. And like I've actually gotten shells that way. Or it's, but it really is like, you start on one thing and then you chase all the way through, and then when you're done with that, then you flip and you go like drone to GCS. You go backwards. Like, if I connect to this drone while it's flying, and then can I connect from the drone to the GCS? Like, that was a huge problem with using like 802.11 protocol drones that are flying around with like a Wi-Fi hotspot essentially.
Hmm.
Like, yeah, you just brute force your way through that SSID, and then you're in that network. And then that network has, you can pivot through that down to the GCS, and it like, that's probably one of the most dangerous, you know, um, telemetry slash video feed protocols that you can have, is an 802.11. Like, having any kind of common Wi-Fi framework on these is not a good idea.
So,
Um,
yeah, go for it.
oh yeah, no, you're good.
So initial access was that Wi-Fi hotspot, and from a Wi-Fi hotspot, you can essentially get into GCS. Have you done this?
Yeah,
Have you done this, or it's? I mean,
yeah, oh yeah,
how did you do it?
yeah. I've done
Can you
that.
talk about?
Um, so honestly, man, that one was like, I was an off-the-shelf drone. Some of the older DJI drones do it as well, but I just bought a drone it was like a $200 drone,
Mhm.
and I grabbed it and I looked at how it was communicating, and I saw that it had it broadcast an SSID, and it was very brief. So it would set itself up to establish the access point, and then it would hide that, hide the SSID. And so the second that I'd read it, and then okay, cool, and then I would start to, try to capture the handshakes and use like a, traditional Wi-Fi tool like a pineapple. The pineapples work great on those because they're very strong as far as what they can like receive, so it can be far away. Or like on top of that, you have like different aspects of like, okay, like I could use like aircrack NG once I get it's all the same as Wi-Fi. And so once you get in though, you're in that network, then you can take over and start sending, you can send communication to the drone because you just sniff it with Wireshark
Mm.
and see like, okay, it's not encrypted because why would it be? And keep in mind that this is like a $200 consumer drone. Like nobody cares if those get hacked because they're like, yeah, of course, it's like buying a $20 router and then hacking it. Of course you're going to be able to do it. But it ties into these more expensive drones because, as you know, like if you look at any kind of like any embedded system, especially, they will always use different like you'll always find the same binaries.
Mm.
And once you find those, like you find them in a cheap drone, then you look for them in the expensive one, and then they show up in an expensive drone, and you're like, oh, that's neat. They just hit it a little bit, or they changed it a little bit. And so that's one of the cooler things about it too, is that a lot of this stuff is, while it looks like fancy, some of the stuff on the inside, it's like like
Basic.
so, yeah, it's very basic, like Raspberry Pi level stuff.
Got it. Um, so the Wi-Fi pineapple thing and the aircrack NG, you were talking about those tools. For people who don't understand what those tools do, so can you, sort of just explain what
Yeah. So a pineapple is a piece of hardware. It basically is like a Wi-Fi access point that's designed to be malicious, and capture a handshake. So the uh, the way that you get into a network is you have what's called a handshake, and you essentially send the packets back and forth. What is it? ACK, SYNAC, SYN. Anyway,
Yeah.
it's not important. But you send those packets back and forth, and if you can capture a full handshake, then you put it through aircrack NG, which is a brute forcing tool, and it will crack that. And then once you crack that, you have the Wi-Fi password. That's one of the many features of a Wi-Fi pineapple. You can also set up like um, you can replicate a paywall. So like when you go to a hotel and you try to get on their Wi-Fi and it's like, oh, you have to put in your room number or your password or
Yeah.
whatever, then you can just copy that web page, put it on your pineapple, and then you have people sending you credentials or whatever that their room number, their last name, things that you would use to charge stuff to a room. Um, and so it's like it's a suite of testing tools. You can duplicate. One of the things that I used to use it for is you use it to duplicate a Wi-Fi hop or a Wi-Fi access point. Like you copy the SSID, and then you have clients that try to connect to it, and they'll send that. That's how you get the handshake, is they'll send that to you thinking that you're the Wi-Fi network that they want to connect to, and you're not. You're obviously, you're whoever sitting on the other end of it, but it's a man in the middle
Mm.
style tool,
So
and there's not a lot that are as good as that,
yeah, the
honestly.
data is not going where it is supposed to be. It is going to the attacker who is using the Wi-Fi pineapple.
Exactly.
Have
Yep.
you watched the show Silicon Valley? The reason I'm asking is there's actually a hack they did using Wi-Fi pineapple. So they wanted people to download their apps, and it's actually I remember the scene when they were moving around with a bunch of Wi-Fi pineapples, and they were inside a security conference inside the show. It's called Holycon, and what they did is they were walking around with these Wi-Fi pineapples, and they hacked into their network, the whole conference's network, and they downloaded their malicious app on the cell phones to create a sort of a bot network to support their decentralized, hypothetical internet. It was a yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, go for. I mean, if you want to, I mean, for people who are listening to us, if you want to really visualize a real Wi-Fi pineapple hack, that scene from Silicon Valley is a good start.
That's actually very good reference for it. And it's one thing that I tell people is like, people always come and ask like, how do I like stay safe? Like people, the second you start talking to people about what you actually like as a hacker, what I can actually do, it scares people, right?
Mm,
And so like one thing that I like to do is like, yeah, I'll tell you what the scary stuff is, but then tell you how to prevent it, right? And so like the pineapple is a scary thing. War driving, having somebody sit outside your house, capture your info, and then like jump into your Wi-Fi network. That's scary, right? But there are a lot of things that you can do to prevent that. Like hiding your SSID it's not like, obviously it's not an end all, but it helps, right? So adding steps to like how to protect yourself always is like, people always like that. um I like I'm not as like protective as I probably should be, but like that's also because you we both know like, okay, I'm gonna accept this risk, right? Like it's like if somebody gets into whatever, I don't give a shit because there's nothing on there. And then, or what you have to know what data you're carrying around on your phone, and if you know what data you have, then you know what you can risk. So that's one of the things that, like these drones, it ties back to that. I tell the clients that all the time. I'm like, do you know what this thing is doing? Like I see a lot of them use open source stuff, especially for the GCS. Like Q Ground Control is one of them, and Mission Planner. Those are two very common GCS software packages. And it's like, okay, do you know what endpoints this is hitting though? Like, do you know where your data is going?
mm.
Can you guarantee your client, whoever buys this drone, that their stuff's not getting sent off to, XYZ or over the air where somebody can capture it and say, oh, like for some reason got their credit card information.
And this can essentially bankrupt the company because the clients can actually sue the company for sending the data
Yep.
to all these third parties, and which, I mean, the company itself was not aware of that because they were using this open source tool or something, or firmware or anything, right?
Yeah, and that's absolutely true. And that's one thing that I always point out too is like, you know, yeah, like you have this like weird view when you talk to a developer when you're trying to give them like feedback on how you exploited
Mm,
something. And like I started in computer science, and so I know like when you have a project and it's your baby, you don't want somebody to tell you how bad it sucks. And so like one aspect of drone pen testing though is like being able to like explain it to them that like what you did is not like a bad thing, but security wise, you need to change it because you will get sued or because you could get somebody hurt, And like, yeah, those debriefing is always like, it's something you got to practice because like
yeah.
you can do it really wrong or you can do it really right. There's something to do. Like you either piss them off or you help them out, right? And so like that's a big aspect of it too, is like you have to know really well what you're doing, what that's causing, um, and like then explain it to a developer and tell him why has to go and fix his code, because it's not easy.
Mm,
Like fix one function in a huge program, you have to go through and it'll snowball, it'll break something. So that's another aspect of drones too, that you have multiple components now that you're testing and telling them, all right, the drone itself is broken, and it's hackable, which then leads me to be able to do this other stuff. So the fix is you got to fix something on GCS and you got to fix something on the drone. So now you got to send PCBs. You have to change PCB design, which is a massive like 8-month
what's a
process,
PCB?
and then you have to change so the PCB, the little circuit boards,
Oh, you're gonna
like
grab.
yeah, so something like this. This is a Wi-Fi sniffer that I have to, or a USB sniffer that I have to put the chips on. But yeah, so the design of this, like this is not a short term. This is not an easy thing to design. You have to be like an electrical engineer, way smarter than me, and that's how and so designing that, it's
Yeah.
expensive. And yeah, a lot of these companies are startups, you know. It's like 5 guys that like drones and they want to sell them. But you know, you can do a lot. Like there's a lot of open source stuff for people that want to learn this too, that can just go out there and like pick it up. Like, let's see. Here, let me grab my
Yeah.
setup. It's right here. So like this is a setup. I can't turn off camera blur,
No, it's
but
fine. So
so I have the GPS here, and it goes into the autopilot, and I just have it on a piece of whatever this is, so that it doesn't like move all over the place. But yeah, this is a target, like a test target.
it
And
doesn't fly, but it works.
exactly, yeah, yeah. I don't necessarily want it to fly because I don't trust myself that much. Like you gotta. There's a lot that goes into making them actually fly, and it's not like as long as I can communicate like it's flying. There's so it's SITL, SITL. That's essentially emulating a flight, and you can do that through all these ground control softwares where you um, SITL is software in the loop, and so you essentially put uh, like you send fake data to the drone, and then the drone pretends to fly. It's like it doesn't actually, but um, so that's another really cool thing that you can do that I've used a lot of. Let's see.
You can fly your drone inside your room, essentially.
Yeah, yeah. I've done that with a real drone too, and I would not recommend it.
What exactly happened? Did you bump the drone into something, or
No, it flew into me. It, yeah, I got confused because it was relying solely on like GPS, and it didn't have it in my basement, and so it was like, wah, it ran into my arm, and I was like, oh, I'll never do that again. But yeah, yeah, they go crazy inside
crazy
if
man?
you don't set them up right. But yeah, like yeah, it's yeah, it's an interesting space for sure.
Interesting as hell, bro. Because so now, since obviously, we know how interesting it is. What advice do you have for someone who is trying to get into drone hacking? So we have two people here who are not essentially into security, and some people who are into security, who do assessments and pen tests. So let's talk about both of those guys. One who is experienced in security, he wants to get into drone hacking. One who's not in security, maybe, but somewhat technical, but who's trying to get into
Yeah.
drone hacking.
So for the person that doesn't have any experience, the thing that I would advise on that is get good at just standard hacking. Like start with, learn how the learn networking, right? Like that's what learn the basics and the fundamentals, because I tried to skip all that and I just wasted like months of time trying to be a hacker instead of being intelligent about it. I just tried to go and pwn machines on Hack the Box or whatever. I didn't know what I was doing. And then I went back and I was like, I'm going to relearn networking. So I built my home lab, and then I taught myself how to create like a network, what it looks like and why you do it. And then, Linux, learning how to like really use Linux. That's like the second thing that I tell everybody. I go through basics of Linux courses anytime I find them, because I don't care who you are, you can always learn something from,
Exactly.
like, even if you only take away one thing, right?
Exactly.
You're going to still learn
Yeah.
something. And so then after you've got the basics down and you can, hack your way into some networked machines, then that's when it gets to the long haul, because then you start looking at like mobile app hacking. You got to start to learn that. RF, you have to at least know like how to sniff different frequencies, um, and do what to do with that data once you sniffed it. And then like you have to learn hardware hacking, like what does a UART header look like? How do I even interface with UART header? What's a spy chip? What are all these different protocols that you would see on a PCB, or in an embedded system? And then IoT hacking, like MQTT, like that's a communication protocol. It's a subscriber sender, like very fast protocol. That's another thing that I see is like, these thousands of protocols that exist out there, they're all in the drones. The communication part of it is almost always Mavlink. So that's one thing that you really like. I would highly recommend any new person, an experienced person, learn, because it's not something we think about, right? Um, so you got like, okay, I want to learn Mavlink and get really good at understanding how it works, because then you get like, if you capture, some Mavlink data, you can figure out the version of it just by like the first bit. Like the first bit tells you, it's like, okay, this is Mavlink 2.1, this is Mavlink 1.0, and they're different because they're different sizes too, like um, different byte size. And that's one of the things that like you don't even think to look at until like you're in the middle of a pen test and you're like, I'm stuck. And that's a terrible feeling. And so like once you get to learning like what Mavlink is and how it works, then you understand drone protocol, and you don't have to know what that a new protocol is doing when you come across it. You just know that it's probably doing something similar. Like you know that it's going to send out like a heartbeat message, and the heartbeat is a critical component to the drones, because like it'll tell you what, like the status of the aircraft, it'll tell you the communications, like it'll say you have a good connection, it'll say like battery status, it'll give you like what version of autopilot is running on it. Like it gives you a lot of info, but if you don't know to look for it, you'll never find it. And so like that would be the next step after you are comfortable and at hacking in those other arenas, is like then you start getting into the drone specific, like the nitty gritty of it. Like you need to understand like what's going on in this little like flying IoT device that has all these components that it has to communicate with, and understanding what kind of data is passed through those through the wire to those different areas of the drone. Like that's another huge component of it, is understanding the flight controller, the flight control software, the firmware. Like the PX4 uses it's called a Pixhawk. It's the like traditional do-it-yourself drone autopilot. It really like is, the firmware is like Arducopter. So you go in and you learn about Arducopter and learn about what it does, and then there's Ardu plane, so you can have like fixed wing drones like that are like RC planes with a camera on them. Submarines is another drone. Rovers, like ground based drones, like they're all of these drones exist, and there's a need to test them, but it's so new that nobody really knows how yet. And I still am learning. Every time I do a pen test, I learn something new, and then I try to take that and grow on it. Like I'm working on a thing right now that utilizes a companion computer, which is like a Raspberry Pi that you plug into the autopilot, and it helps handle the processing of data. And I'm creating a man in the middle setup that essentially will sniff that and then allow me to send commands. But like it, there's a huge need for people that are passionate about drones, that want to make them safer, and be able to just tinker with them relentlessly. Like build your own drone if you can afford. Like, and it's not expensive by any means. It's not cheap, but it's like, you go on Amazon, you can find like, that whole setup with everything you need to put on a drone, um, like component wise, was like $100, and then you get a frame and then some motors and then speed controllers, and then you're good. You don't even need a camera if you don't plan to fly farther than a few feet. But like cameras are cheap, you can strap a GoPro to it. Like, there's countless things you can do to teach yourself, but that's what like the takeaway is on this, is like you have to teach yourself what these drones do, because there's not really a good way to understand them without doing it. It's not like I could write a book about it, but until you do it and understand, like, oh, I've set this up before. Like when you set something up, you're going to understand it at a
Exactly.
very base level. So you have to set these things up, and learn how they work and learn where you want to look. That's the most important thing. Is
Mm.
you could spend days looking and not find anything because you're looking in the wrong place, right?
Yeah.
um, and so like as far as like somebody with pen testing experience, it is a little different, but essentially follow the same steps. Like if you're a network pen tester, you're going to have to learn hardware, IoT, and the concepts come quicker, but it's still the same process of like go through and learn everything you can about those different types of hacking, and then learn about the drones themselves and what they do, how they operate, how they communicate, and then you can start to like truly pen test them. But yeah, you have to have just an understanding and an appreciation for it, because if you don't, they'll drive you insane. Even with a passion, they drive me insane sometimes.
Mm. So for a beginner, learn the fundamentals first. Hacking fundamentals or security fundamentals before you dive into drone hacking. And for people who are already in the industry and penetration testers, they can straight away get into hardware, IoT, and learning about all these protocols that drone uses.
Yep.
There's another interesting thing that you mentioned. When I think of drones, I see, it's something that can fly. But you mentioned, there are drones that, like a submarine, or drones that operate on the ground.
Yep. Yeah. And that's kind of a weird, like, I was the same way, honestly. Like you say drone, I think a little tiny camera drone.
Mm,
Like that's the first thing that comes to most people's mind is like drone flies, you know. But yeah, there's so many, like I'm actually building a drone right now, and I'm integrating a bunch of hacking stuff into it, like a Raspberry Pi with Kali, um, a, an LTE, like a 5G hotspot, so that I can connect to it while it's flying, and then like taking apart a Wi-Fi pineapple, and I'm going to integrate the pineapple into the drone body, and then I'm going to put a couple other things like hardware pieces that for hacking into it, um, for like pen testing. But that's another thing about a drone is like I was saying, the use case is whatever you want it to be, and then you just design it around it. So like there's all kinds of crazy stuff that I have in my head, like a drone that carries a rover, like a little tiny, like drivable one.
mm,
Drive it to like if you're doing a physical assessment, like a physical pen test, you just fly the drone, set it down, put the rover down, and then fly away, and then you have a little tiny robot wherever you want it. Like you could go and park it and just watch people go in. You could zoom in on the keypad and see like, oh, they're putting in this key. Like the possibilities with drones and pen testing
mm,
are like they're massive. Like um so Heath from TCM Security, I actually got to know him through drone. He was wanting to do a pen test with a drone, and so I gave him some recommendations, and we just kept talking and like became friends over time. But he uses them for physical pen tests, and it's like, people don't think about the applications of them until you start to like really think like what would be cool, like if I could see this with the camera and zoom in, what could I do, and it changes it changes the attack surface of a physical target greatly, because now you have a little tiny camera
mm.
drone that has a like a zoom, a 30 times zoom. It can sit out of range, you can't hear it, and you can still watch a keypad
Exactly.
and watch what people type. You can pattern security guards and say, okay, they go along this route every 15 minutes. And then you can say, okay, they don't go over here at all. Like that's from a physical side, and using a drone as a pen test tool, that's what people don't often think about is like you can get so much information just by watching. It's like having access to their security cameras
Mm,
exterior without like actually needing it. And so you don't leave any kind of like trail or any kind of indicator that you were watching
yeah.
them. And and like another thing is the commonness of drones. Everybody's got one. Like there's so many people have these things that like seeing one flying around isn't like a shock
Yeah.
anymore,
Mm.
right? It's like there's a fucking drone. Like God, that's annoying. But you don't think about it in like the aspect of like, oh, they're watching me type in my garage code, you know, or they're like, there's a lot of things that this could be used for that like are nefarious by nature, but if we start to like think about like from a securing thing standpoint, you create a you have to create like a more abstract way of being secure. Like if you're going to use a keypad, you got to have one that changes the like where each button's number changes. So you can't like say like, oh, 1337. Like, you can't just copy what their hand is doing because it changes. And there's fixes for all the things that are scary about what I was just saying, but you have to acknowledge it as a security community first before you can even
Right.
like begin to fix it. And it has to happen like unfortunately things have to happen before people give a shit about them, right? Like somebody has to say like, oh my god, like this bank got hacked because they used like a drone to
Yeah.
like steal different data or whatever. Like you can use them as an exfil tool. That's one of the things I'm doing with the one I'm building is setting up a network so that if you do get access to a
Mhm.
machine that has Wi-Fi, you can connect to the drone's Wi-Fi and exfil that way. Then you don't get there's no like, it's not going to go through a threat hunting system. It won't go through any of the blue team tools because you're running it through a drone,
Exactly.
and they're capable of huge data transfer. But like, people don't think about it, and it's like, how do you even prevent that, right? Well, you keep your computers from connecting to Wi-Fi,
Mm.
but then you have to think of the practicality of that. Like, I wouldn't be okay if I couldn't
Exactly.
connect my computer to
Yeah.
Wi-Fi because then like you're stuck to an Ethernet, But there's so many different things that you can do. Hacking drones and hacking with drones, like there's two different worlds there, and I do both. But like you, when you start to use your imagination with these things, that's why they exist in the first place. Is because some crazy dude was like, I want a helicopter with a camera on it. And it's like, yeah, that's fucking cool. I want that too. And so you get people that innovate and build and create and then share how they did it. Like that is beautiful to me.
Mm.
And so like the more you get into these different like little aspects of like what you can do, then it's like what can't you do, right? Like yeah, I've got a little like that'd be cool to have like if you're doing a pen test target along the coast, you put a little submarine in the water and go up to your target, get close enough, and then you got the same kind of, exfil setup, except it's in the water. You can't hear it or see it,
So,
and it can just sit there.
yeah.
You're not going to burn the battery by floating there. And like it, the limitations are just whatever you can think. Like wherever you limit yourself, that's where they are. That and local laws. But what are you going to do? Like it's such a cool space though, and like I I think that it's only going to grow from here, and that's why I think it's so critical to start like talking about it early
Mm.
on. Is because like half of the stuff that I just talked about, like I just came up with while we were talking about it. I was like, because that's how what you can do with these is it's like, holy shit, like I could do that. Like I could literally just park the drone on top of a roof and use the camera, and then you're not burning the battery. It's not loud, and nobody's gonna care. Like nobody's gonna pay attention to that. But yeah, no, there's so many possibilities, and like I love it, and that's why they're like I have a huge passion for drones, and that's why it's because I see like endless possibility. I don't see like a flying camera that's annoying, and so that's how you kind of if you're gonna start hacking them, you have to like consider what you could do with these things. Like you could create a C2 server off of somebody else's drone, and
So,
now that's a
yeah.
problem, right? So you hack in, you put your little C2 setup on their drone, and then you exfil their data through their drone to you. Like there's that's part of the things that people don't like think about when it comes to why should I have this pen tested, you know? And it's a huge like it's sad that but it's also I mean I get it. It's a new tech. Any new tech, nobody knows what the hell they need to
Yeah.
test
Yes.
or what's scary about it until you make it scary,
Mm.
until you show what you can do. So that's one of the reasons I love it, and like I love talking about it too. As you can tell, I got all
Yeah. Exactly, man.
spun up and nerd out. Yeah.
Exactly, and that's one of the reasons I keep these episodes very conversational. I mean, if I would have scripted it, you would have not come up with these ideas that we are talking about now. Since you were mentioning all those things, now I'm thinking we can even do an episode that's not focusing too much on hacking drones itself, but essentially using drones in physical penetration tests, and we can give it a title like hacking with drones.
Yeah, I mean, and that honestly, like, there's a that's essentially why I even have my pilot's license, was because I thought of that a couple of years ago. I was like, I bet you could hack with these. Like, and then I put a Wi-Fi pineapple on the bottom of a DJI and, a little Raspberry Pi, and then I linked that up to an LTE hotspot.
Mm,
And I mean, it weighed the drone down a lot. It burned I crashed it in the forest because it weighed too much, but it was a small drone. But I was able to like fly a pineapple over my neighborhood and get SSID pools. So then that opens up war flying, which war flying, so Heath Adams from TCM did a video on war flying that is far better than what I could
mhm,
articulate, but it's based on what I was talking about with, like, you can create this, you essentially take the wireless world and you make it so that you can go anywhere. Like fences and war driving, you can't get close enough, fly a drone over it. I mean, obviously do it with permission, because like you don't want to mess in the United States, you don't want to mess with the FAA. It's like messing with the tax, it's like messing with the IRS,
yes.
the tax people, because like, man, they will
Fuck
eat
you
you
up.
alive if you do it without permit. Yeah, man, it's fucking scary. But at the same time, like, if you have the permission to do it, you go out and do it, then you've just shown, like, here's another scary, like, here's something that we need to consider. Like, how if whatever you have is needing physical security to the point where, like, you can set up things that will keep drones out,
Mm,
because like now you have like drone ID, which is a new thing that, it's controversial because it's like it tells you where your drone is and where the operator is, and so you can actually find that data. And from a security standpoint, it's scary because you can see where people are, right? You have like access to them. But from like a protection standpoint, you can also use that to tell a drone you can't fly in here,
mm,
and it'll turn around. Like, you can create a bubble without actually having to have a physical bubble. And so, there's things like that people are going to have to start thinking about, especially if you have something like if you're a government agency, or if like you have like a monument, for instance. Like, you can't fly over any monuments in the States here because they don't want people crashing their drones into like Mount Rushmore or whatever. But you put them there, and then you keep it helps prevent that. Is it a fix for everything? No, nothing is. But like, it's a good thing to have. It's a good thing to know exists as well.
exactly. Let's do an episode on actually hacking with drones, man. Because
Yeah,
yeah,
I'm down.
whenever you
Yeah,
want,
no, I'm down.
whenever you want.
Yeah, no, I'll walk through setting up a drone to hack, and then we can go from there. I might sneak preview my pwn drone that I'm building.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
I have parts everywhere for it. That's why I'm using obs, because it's like behind me is just a mess of like shit that I'm using for that. But
Man,
um
it's
yeah,
yeah,
man.
it's funny. You can actually, you will be able to do a physical pen test without actually being physically present inside the building.
Yeah, miles away.
Yeah,
Like, some of these radios can go up to like 20 kilometers, which is a massive distance you can put between yourself and a target. Like, nobody's going to chase that thing 20 clicks back to where you're
of
at,
course.
because you're like, you fly over some trees and they can't follow you. They can't figure out where you're at. And like, it's it's things like that. It adds what we love as hackers, and that's distance between us and our target, right? And that's one thing that, like, the physical side is very hard, because
Yes,
you eliminate that, and then you can't hide behind proxies, VPNs. You can't, you can't hide. Essentially, you have to be good at.
yes.
But with drones, it adds that whole, like, the distance thing,
Another layer.
the
Yeah,
whole telemachian, yeah, the telemachian approach to fighting from afar. So like, that's one thing that, like, I see a lot of potential with.
yeah, man. Let's do another episode. So I have one question from the community. Yeah,
Yeah.
I asked on your Discord community what question you would like they would like me to ask, and one of the questions that came up was how did you actually get into drone hacking? Because you mentioned that you were a firefighter before. Now, how does that work? Yeah.
Yes. Man, it's so I was firefighter and then I got hurt and I couldn't be a firefighter anymore. And so I was looking and I've always been interested in like I've always been in some form of security, public safety. And so like I was looking around and I was like, I'm just going to go to school for computer science and I'll be a software engineer. And then I got super bored. Um, like the college I was going to was not great. Like, and I think that's just kind of the general like consensus about college right
Yeah.
now. But I like got super bored. It like wasn't teaching me anything, and so I started to have to. It's not honestly, it's like an overpaid. I don't even know what it
Yeah.
is. Like, but I didn't learn anything. I was teaching myself everything, and I was like, this is stupid. And then one day I was like, I want to hack something. Like that sounds fun. And then I just kind of like took off from there. Like I found a passion, and the second that I was able to like tie that passion in, man, I was gone. Like, and then I started using the computer science things that I had picked up to like help me with that. And then I just like started learning. But then I had always had this side passion with drones. And then when I got hired up at the company I work at Dark Wolf Solutions, they just were like, you know, I was talking about it in my interview, and then when after I got hired, they were like, we have a drone pen testing section, and that's where we're gonna put you. And so like it was a lot of luck, some fate, some like I had experience with drones, and then it just kind of like blossomed from there. And now that I do it as a profession, I that's all I think about and chase. And so like it grows and grows and grows, and like every time I do a test, my goal is to do something new every time, do a different like find something that not a lot of people would think about and then attack that. And then after that, then I can do that on every test, and then I add something else, and so like you have to just find what you
Mm,
love, and then you have to just like one advertise that you know about it,
exactly.
like, and then two, like you have to like seek it out, and you have to like almost will it into existence. But you do have to like you have to look and seek it out and say like, this is what I want to do, and then advertise that you want to do that, and then show that you have experience with it in the first place. Like that's something that's kind of like, that worked really well for me, was like putting my pilot's license on my resume, and then like talking about some past experiences that I had with military
Mm,
drones, like stuff like that. And so that's truly how I got into it, was just like luck and also passion. Like my company is really good at seeing passion in people and then having them do that and chase that. And that's what I love about it. So like if you want to go out and be a drone hacker, I would say like teach yourself as much as you can, and then like advertise that that's what you're learning, and tell the world like on LinkedIn or whatever, I'm learning how to hack drones. And then you get people that want to hire drone
mm.
hackers that are like, okay, like let's go with them, right? Like that same principle. Um, but yeah, it's definitely not. It's very niche, very small community right now. But
But it's rewarding because the
yeah,
market cap is going to, of course, grow in future, right? So,
oh yeah, yeah,
bro, you talked about that you have experience with military drones when you were, talking about how you got into drone hacking. Can you talk about that? I mean,
yeah, a little
yeah,
bit.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Only the
yeah,
parts that you can, say on a podcast.
yeah. I mean, I was in the Air Force for 12 years, and when I first started at the very beginning, I worked on the Predator and the Reaper drones, and then I after that I switched over to EOD, which is like bomb squad, um, and then I went to firefighting after that. But like in the time that I was in the with the drones, you learn a lot about like things that you don't normally think about, like radio, like how far can you communicate, or like what do you need to do in order to like get sustained flight, or how like just the general setup of a UAV and the like what you need in order to make it function. Like a GCS, you need a link and then you need the drone itself. Like that was on a very grand scale what kind of what I learned. Like massive drones that were as like very very big, and now I work with very tiny like some of them are like that. They're tall, they're small.
Mm.
And so, but they all have the same concepts, even though they're different sizes, different mission sets. Like I haven't tested any that have missiles, but like
Yeah,
they're,
yeah. Can you talk about the mission that you did? I mean, I can edit it out and I can stop the recording if you don't want to talk about that. But since it's it probably is classified. But is there any mission that you can talk about when you were in the Air Force? You know.
I mean, it was a long time
Mm.
ago, and like the mission was a lot of times like surveillance, and
Mm.
like in the Afghan war or in the Iraq war, um, but a lot of it was just surveillance and being able to like stay on a target for 15 hours. Like that was something that like it changed a lot because we had like you go from like you got a helicopter that's super loud flying over and it's like I know I can see that, like I'm gonna go hide from it, or like it's only gonna be here for 15 minutes versus like you can't hear it, you don't know it's there. There's a lot of like from a tactical standpoint, it's an insanely useful tool. Um, and then on top of that, like it definitely kept like a lot of people safe, and that's more what I was focused on when I was deployed. Was like I didn't want to do like I just diffused bombs, and like we had drones that kept us from dying, and that was all I cared about.
Diffused
But like
bombs.
yeah, IEDs, that was my job in the military after I was done with drones.
Ah.
And so
Oh,
I've had a lot of weird jobs that an interesting career.
what's the use case for a drone in a bomb squad? I mean, to find the drones or what? I mean, sorry, to find the
Yeah,
bomb or.
yeah. I mean, back then we didn't do it because there wasn't really anything available on a small scale. We used the rover-based robots, like the little ones with the claws that you go and you see in the
Yeah.
movies that go out and like whatever. But um, having a drone that flies, you no longer have to worry about like ground-based triggers, and so like there's a lot of like use case for that in that world because you take away an entire attack surface that's the most common, right? Like your pressure plates, your trip wires, your all these things. You pretty much would have to either there's you'd have to be able like watching the drone to blow it up, or you
Mm.
would have to like have something that could detect the drone and figure out where if it's close enough to even do anything to it. And that's like the biggest thing that like when it comes to diffusing a bomb is distance. Like you keep yourself as far away from it as you can and still get the job done. And that's where like having a drone would be massive because then you could sit 150 feet above it and zoom in and see it like you're 5 feet away, and then all of a sudden you have like a bigger picture of what's going on without actually having to be near it and put yourself in danger. And like that would be huge. And I don't know if they're doing it now because I've been out for a while, but I mean that would definitely be another use case for a drone.
Got it. Cool, man. It's almost an hour. I didn't even realize.
Yeah, hour and 10.
Yeah.
I know it kind of went by quick.
Yep. Exactly. That's what happens when when you talk to people who are passionate about the things they talk about or the things they learn. I.
Yeah, that's one thing that like I love to talk when people talk with passion because you learn a lot, right?
Hmm.
And so I definitely enjoy it.
Cool, man.
I like to talk about drones too, so but yeah, man, this has been awesome.
The classic a podcast host question: if someone wants to reach out to you, how can they do it?
Um, I'm on Discord and LinkedIn, but I don't typically pay too much attention to LinkedIn anymore. So I'm Sly Fox on Discord, and I have my server Fox Hunt that is just a community for people to learn cybersecurity, um, learn and get resources, ask questions, and I love to be able to like help people where I was struggling. Like there was nowhere that I could go and just ask these questions that I had when I was starting, and so that's why I started Fox Hunt. was out of like I was angry, and so I made it out of an anger, and it blossomed. It's I think 1,400 people in there now or something like that.
Yeah.
But I have a lot of pros that know a lot about a specific niche area, and then people that want to learn about it, and then as they learn, then they contribute more, and so it's an open source community essentially, like open source learning, and that's what I love about it. And so yeah, if any of the listeners want to pick my brain, I'm more than willing to talk on Discord, and I'll send you a link that if you wanted to post it for the Discord. But
Yeah, I'm actually part of the community, so I'm gonna put it anyway.
oh yeah, you have access to the links, don't you?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, yeah,
Cool, man.
yeah, no, that's how you get a hold of me.
It was fun, and we're gonna, if you want, we can do another episode, in the future about actually hacking with drones. That would be an interesting one.
I think definitely think we should do that. I'll start putting stuff together for it, because that one I feel like is going to need more demonstration.
Whenever you're ready,
So
man. Whenever you're ready, just let me know. I'm gonna. Yep.
no,
Cool, bro. So
that'll be awesome.
okay, so I'm gonna actually post some sneak peeks of our conversation in our Discord community for people to, that would be exclusive to your Discord community only.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
It'd be awesome.
Cool, bro.
Right on, man. Well, it was great talking to you.
Yeah, the feelings are mutual.
Yeah. All right. Take care, man.
Okay.
We'll talk to you later.
Yeah, thanks, bro. See ya.
Bye.
Okay. Bye. I asked one question from my every guest. I asked for advice. So, what advice do you have for me to become better at all this host thing?
I mean, honestly, this has been like one of the easiest conversation interviews that I've ever had. So, really, I would say maybe we could, I don't know, maybe get more technical, but not, I don't know. You ask great questions. You let me ramble, and then you were able to pick out some good questions out of, the nonsense that I was saying, which is impressive. A lot of times I think I confuse people because I'll start to rabbit trail, and you were able to keep pace with me and not have to have me reiterate, but instead you would ask a question that came out of that, and they were great questions. None of them was I ever oh, that's a weird question. I felt like they were all great questions that people would want to know that don't know what they're doing or what drone hacking is about. So I mean, my feedback would just be to keep doing that. Your ability to pick questions out of people's conversations is huge. So just keep doing that, because that's where you get a lot of really good info, is curiosity. So I definitely, it's been fun.
Exactly. And the reason I don't keep it too technical is, since it's going on YouTube, it's not the right platform to actually get into. I mean, a podcast is not actually the right platform to really get into the technical stuff. So what? Yeah. I mean, for example, now I think about it. If someone wants to actually learn drone hacking, they can join your community. That's one way to do it. So
Yeah, absolutely.